They say time passes quietly in a house filled with love. I used to believe that. Once, William and I built this life together with all the right intentions. A red brick home with white shutters and a backyard where laughter once bloomed like spring tulips. When Alan was born, I was 24. Young, perhaps too young, but I poured myself into motherhood with the fierce devotion only first-time mothers can understand. I would rock him for hours even after he'd fallen asleep, just to keep holding that small miracle. I memorized every inch of his baby face, the way his little fist curled around my finger like he was afraid the world might take me away. William was present in the way a reliable fixture is. He went to work, came home, paid the bills and changed diapers when I asked. But he never marveled at Alan's tiny toes the way I did. Never stopped to catch his breath at Clarissa's first laugh. With William, parenting was obligation. With me, it was worship. Clarissa came 2 years later, fiery and loud from the moment she entered the world. She was my shadow, my echo. While Alan was quiet, almost studious even as a toddler, Clarissa lit every room with a kind of chaos I secretly adored. I'd twirl with her in the kitchen while Alan sat at the table coloring within the lines. Always within the lines. Our house was alive then. Not with passion. William and I hadn't had that in years, but with noise. Morning rushes of cereal and spilled juice, school projects scattered across the living room, the clatter of video games from Alan's room and pop music blaring from Clarissa's. I lived in that noise. I needed that noise. It masked the truth. That without them, William and I had nothing but routines and stale dinners. But children grow. That's what they're meant to do. Clarissa left first, heading off to Chicago to study art, full of conviction and painted fingernails. Alan followed a year later, just across town for computer science, but it may as well have been a continent. One day I was making 3 lunches, washing piles of mismatched socks, and setting 4 plates. The next day there were 2. Then 1. The silence arrived like a fog. William took to reading the newspaper again. From front to back, every section, even the obituaries. He didn't ask about my day. I stopped asking about his. Our conversations grew brittle. Weather, mail, what to make for dinner. Once I tried to reminisce. Mentioned Alan's 3rd birthday party, when he refused to let go of his helium balloon and cried for an hour when it floated away. William didn't remember. He just grunted and turned the page. That night, I sat in the laundry room until midnight, folding a basket of clean dish towels I'd already folded once. My hands worked while my chest ached. This man I had once promised forever to. He was now a ghost sharing my coffee. I don't know when I decided. Maybe it wasn't one moment, but hundreds, stretched across years of half-hearted smiles and shared beds that never felt warm. One morning after William left for work, I poured myself a glass of orange juice and sat at the table staring at my wedding ring. The sun hit the gold band and for the first time in years, I saw how dull it had become. We had done well by our children. That was true. Alan was steady, thoughtful, responsible. Clarissa was wild, free, and beautifully defiant. We had given them roots and wings. But William and I, what were we now? We were 2 people bound by years and bricks and dust. We didn't argue, we didn't fight. That might have been easier. We just stopped being. I felt like a ghost myself, living in the past, haunting my own life. So I called him at work. Asked him to come home early. And when he walked in, still wearing that dull gray suit he'd worn for the last 15 years, I asked him to sit down. "William," I said quietly, "we're done." He didn't ask me why. Didn't protest. He just looked at me, really looked at me, and in that moment I think we both saw it clearly. The last flame had long flickered out. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No tears. Just a mutual acknowledgement of something we'd known in our bones. I spent that night alone on the couch, staring at the ceiling. And for the first time in years I let myself wonder. What now? I was 48. Not young, not old. Not gone, not found. But maybe, just maybe, I wasn't finished yet. I moved into the guest room the next day. Not because William asked me to, but because staying in our shared bedroom felt like sleeping beside a life that had already ended. The walls remembered too much. The scent of his aftershave, the imprint on his pillow, the drawer I'd once filled with my journals but now only held expired coupons and a stray sock. Every object whispered reminders. We didn't tell the kids right away. Clarissa would have launched into high-pitched, worried pleas. Alan would have said nothing. His silence louder than any scream. I wasn't ready for their questions. or worse, their judgments, so we coexisted for a while. Two strangers in the same house, passing like weather systems. I made my coffee. He made his. The dishwasher beeped, the fridge hummed, and neither of us filled the void with words. I kept telling myself this was temporary. Shedding. Like molting skin or the last leaves on the tree outside the kitchen window. Painful, necessary, natural. The nights were hardest. I would lie awake under a too-warm blanket, listening to the hum of the ceiling fan, aching with the absence of something I couldn't name. I didn't miss William, not really. I missed feeling connected. Needed. Alive. I started walking in the mornings. Not for fitness but for movement, for the illusion of going somewhere. The path through the neighborhood was familiar. The same houses, the same dogs barking, the same cracked sidewalk I always meant to report to the HO. And yet it all looked different. The world felt separate from me, like I was watching it through thick glass. Clarissa came to visit once during those weeks. She swept in with a tote bag full of thrifted clothes, stories about gallery exhibits, and kisses on both cheeks. Made quiche. She barely ate it. "You seem distracted," she said, finally noticing my quiet. "Is everything okay?" I hesitated. "Your father and I are rethinking things." "Like what?" "Retirement." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Like everything." Clarissa's expression changed. Her smile faltered just slightly before she nodded. "I guess I'm not surprised." I blinked. "You're not." She shrugged, reaching for a bottle of water. "You two haven't really talked in years. You were always more alive when you were painting or baking with me." He just read books. There was no venom in her voice. Just an odd kind of clarity, like she had been waiting for me to realize what she'd already seen. She left that afternoon. "Call me if you need to talk," she said as she hugged me goodbye. "Or cry. Or scream into a pillow. I've got playlists for all three." I stood at the window after she drove off, watching the sky shift from pink to gold, and realized that I felt lonelier than I ever had. It was a strange thing, really. How you could spend 2 decades raising a family, giving every piece of yourself away, and still feel like there was no one who really saw you when it all quieted down. I thought of Alan, just a few blocks away in his apartment, though we rarely spoke. He and William had always shared a kind of silent understanding, the way some men do when they don't speak much but operate in sync. Alan never asked for help. Never brought troubles home. He was methodical, polite, distant. While Clarissa and I could talk about anything, from feminism to her favorite pizza topping, Alan and I mostly stuck to birthday texts and weather updates. But that silence between us wasn't made of malice. It was just space. Carefully arranged and respectfully maintained. That night, alone again in the guest room, I made myself a small dinner. Some roasted carrots, a bit of cheese, and a glass of wine. I stared at the flame of a single candle for a long time. I couldn't remember the last time I had lit one just for myself. As the wax pooled and my thoughts tangled, something inside me shifted. I didn't want to mourn a marriage that had ended years before the paperwork would. I didn't want to sit in a house built for a family that had already flown. I didn't want to keep pretending that silence was safer than change. There was a chance still. For something unspoken. Something unnamed. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew it wouldn't come knocking on my door. I had to go to it. The day I decided to speak the truth out loud, it rained. Not a downpour. Just a steady gray drizzle that tapped the windows with rhythmic persistence, like the house itself was asking for release. William was sitting at the dining table. His reading glasses slipping to the tip of his nose, a mug of black coffee cooling beside him. He still read the paper cover to cover the way my grandfather used to. I paused in the kitchen doorway for a moment, watching him in his chair with its familiar creak. I knew the lines of his profile by heart, the gray at his temples, the way he rubbed his temple when a headline annoyed him. There was no hatred in my chest, no betrayal, no anger, just a stillness that had been there for years, masquerading as peace. "I need to talk to you," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel that no longer matched anything in the kitchen. He didn't look up. "MHM. I stepped into the room. "William." He turned his head, finally seeing me. "What's wrong?" The question struck me, what's wrong? As if we hadn't both been sleeping next to a stranger for the past decade. I sat across from him. My fingers traced the grain of the table we'd bought when Clarissa was born. We had laughed back then, young and covered in paint from fixing up the nursery. I missed the girl I used to be. I think we should separate, I said softly. He blinked once. Then nodded, as if I'd told him I'd burned dinner. I've been thinking the same, he said after a long pause. That surprised me. I don't know why. Maybe because William was the type to stick with things. People. Then why haven't you said anything? He shrugged. I didn't know if you wanted to be the one to leave, or if you just needed more time. I thought maybe we'd just keep going. I looked at him and saw not a villain, but a man worn down by the years. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't careless. He was simply not mine anymore. I don't want to keep going like this, I said. We did good. We raised 2 wonderful kids. We built a life. But I want more now. Something that feels real again. He nodded, took off his glasses, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. I know. We sat in silence then. Not the cold silence that had stretched between us for years, but a gentler one. A silence of understanding. I don't hate you, I whispered. He offered a sad smile. I don't hate you either. The logistics followed, calm, civil, almost eerily so. He'd move into the condo near his office. We'd divide things fairly. No lawyers, no fights. The children would be told together. I almost wished for an argument, something to make it feel less sterile. But we'd long since drained the emotion from our marriage. That night I took a long bath. I poured lavender oil into the water, lit a candle, and cried until the water was cold. Not out of regret but grief, for the girl who thought marriage would save her, for the woman who stayed too long out of fear. In the days that followed, I moved through the motions with mechanical grace. I boxed up William's books, labeled drawers, made lists. Clarissa called twice, cheerful and unaware. Alan texted once, a simple, all good mom. I sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Eventually we told them. Clarissa gasped, then frowned in silence. But you guys always seemed okay. That was the problem, I said gently. We were always just okay. She hugged me tight. You deserve more than okay. Alan's reaction was less expressive. He came by, stood in the living room with his hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning the half-packed boxes. So, this is real, he asked. It is. He nodded slowly. You okay? I think I will be, I said. He didn't hug me like his sister had. But his eyes lingered on mine a little longer than usual before he left. And I noticed, for the first time, that his gaze wasn't distant. It was thoughtful, curious even. That evening, I sat on the back porch with a glass of wine and watched the sky bleed into twilight. I was alone, yes. But I wasn't afraid. Something was beginning. Something unspoken. The first few weeks after William moved out were like learning how to breathe underwater. Everything looked the same. Dishes in the sink, the clock ticking in the hallway, the wind through the curtains. But there was no sound. No energy. The air had a kind of hollow texture, like it wasn't meant to be filled by just one person. Kept up appearances. Went to the market. Watered the succulents. Cleaned the baseboards, even though no one would ever notice. Clarissa called less often. She was busy with her boyfriend, with gallery work, with what she called real life. She offered to take me out, to have brunch or shop or get facials like fun moms do. But something in her voice said she was checking a box. I declined more often than I accepted. I wasn't lonely all the time. But there were moments, thick, inescapable moments, when the silence felt too sharp, too alive. And that's when I thought of Alan. Surprised me, honestly. Not because he wasn't thoughtful. He was in his own quiet way. But because we had never been close. Clarissa and I had been the talkers, the emotional ones. Alan and I had always passed each other like 2 satellites orbiting the same planet. Connected by gravity but not by words. Still he lived close by. Just a short walk across the neighborhood. I had never been to his place. He had invited me once, briefly, and I had made excuses. I didn't want to intrude. I hadn't wanted to see how quickly he'd built a life without me in it. For now, I didn't want to be alone. That afternoon I put together a basket. Groceries, a bottle of white wine, fresh rosemary, sea salt, 2 small trout fillets wrapped in paper. I hadn't even asked if he was home. I just needed to move. Walk. To knock on a door that wasn't locked by years of disappointment. The sun was beginning to dip low as I climbed the stairs to his small porch. My heart fluttered with a ridiculous kind of nervousness. I knocked. Once. The door opened. Alan stood there in a worn t-shirt, a pair of jeans slung low on his hips. His hair messy like he'd been napping or coding, or both. "Mom." His voice was cautious, like he didn't quite believe I was real. "Hi, honey," I said with a smile that felt suddenly fragile. "I brought groceries. And wine. I figured I'd cook." He blinked at me, then stepped aside without a word. Inside, his apartment was surprisingly warm. Earthy. Books and plants and a record player with a jazz album spinning soft in the background. It didn't smell like a bachelor pad. It smelled like rosemary and cedarwood. He hugged me. Not one of those awkward one-armed hugs we used to share out of obligation. No, this one was real. His arms wrapped around me like they meant it. And I felt, for the first time in a long time, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. "I just needed to talk to someone," I said as I set the basket on his kitchen counter. "I thought maybe I could make us dinner. Trout with rosemary, wild rice, maybe a salad. And wine, of course." "You didn't have to bring anything," he said, his voice low. "I know. But I wanted to." He watched me for a moment, then smiled. Not the polite smile of a son being patient with his mother, but a deeper one. Like he understood something I hadn't said. "I'll open the wine." We cooked together side by side. I chopped herbs while he stirred the rice. There was music, laughter. Small talk that turned into stories. He told me about work, his latest projects, a failed date with someone who talked about astrology for 3 hours straight. I laughed, really laughed, and felt something inside me begin to thaw. "You know," I said as we sat down to eat, "I always thought you were more like your father. Quiet. Guarded." He raised an eyebrow, then took a sip of wine. Was that a compliment or a critique? Smiled. "Maybe both. But I was wrong. You're different. Easier to talk to than I thought." He tilted his head. "That sounds like an apology." "Maybe it is." He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "You can stay here tonight if you want. You don't have to go back to that empty house." There was no implication in his voice. Just kindness. Just the offer of company. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I think I will." That night we didn't talk much more. After dinner, he set up the couch for me, brought me a blanket, asked if I needed anything. I said no, but he brought an extra pillow anyway. When he went to his room, I lay awake for a long time, listening to the soft rhythm of his steps, the way the walls creaked with a different kind of life than the one I'd left behind. There was something here. Not just comfort. Not just a roof. But something new. I didn't plan to stay. But that first night turned into 2, and 2 turned into a week. And the funny thing was, Alan never asked when I was going home. He made room for me. Not just on the couch, but in the fridge, on the bathroom counter, on the bookshelf. I placed a few tea bags by the kettle, and one afternoon, he surprised me by replacing the old chipped mug I'd used with one that had sunflowers on it. "For your mornings," he said, his voice casual. It wasn't casual to me. Clarissa texted me once during that week. An emoji and a meme. I sent back a smiling face, but she didn't ask where I was, and I didn't say. I don't think she would have understood. She would have smiled too brightly, laughed too hard, and said something like, Mom's finally getting her groove back." But this wasn't about a groove. It was about presence, stillness, the feeling of being seen again, even in the smallest ways. Alan and I didn't have deep talks at first. We talked about mundane things. Cooking, news, the weird neighbor upstairs who smoked at odd hours and always wore socks with sandals. But I started noticing the way he looked at me when I spoke. Not like I was old. Not like I was irrelevant. Like I was real. One night we had risotto and wine. I'd picked up a little tiramisu for dessert, and we sat on the floor by the coffee table, because Alan said the couch felt too upright for desserts. Made me laugh. "I used to think you didn't really like talking to me," I said as I dug my spoon through the cream. He looked up. "I used to think you were too close to Clarissa to notice me." That surprised me. "You always got her jokes," he added. "She made you laugh." I never really knew what to say. "You didn't have to," I said gently. "You were always so self-sufficient. You never asked for anything." "Maybe I should have," he replied. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full. Full of understanding, of regret, of beginnings. Later that night, I started to gather my things. I didn't want to overstay, to make him feel obligated. But as I moved toward the front door with my coat in hand, he stopped me. "Don't go," he said. "I mean, if you don't want to." I blinked. I've gotten used to having you here, he continued, rubbing the back of his neck. It's nice. The food. The company. You. I felt something then, light, warm, and frightening. You sure I'm not just interrupting your bachelor piece? He smiled. You're making it better. Stay. And I did. The following morning, Alan made breakfast. Not just toast and eggs. No, he made pancakes just the way I liked them. With jam. Chocolate swirled into the batter. A scoop of ice cream melting slowly on top. He brewed coffee strong and dark, then added a dollop of vanilla cream, knowing I hated it any other way. I stared at the plate for a full minute, touched beyond words. You trying to fatten me up? Tease. He grinned. I'm treating you like a queen. I laughed, then quieted. The warmth in his voice lingered too long, curled into the air between us like smoke. Are you flirting with me? I asked, half joking, half not. He looked me in the eye. Would it be so bad if I was? Froze. The air shifted. Something ancient inside me stirred. Part fear, part longing, part everything I thought I'd buried for good. I'm your mother, I whispered. You're Meg, he said. A woman. A person who's kind and radiant and beautiful and who deserves to be adored. I looked down at my coffee, heart pounding. You're making this complicated, I murmured. No. I think I'm just being honest. It would have been easier if he'd laughed it off. If he'd dismissed it as a joke. But he didn't. Instead, he stood up and began clearing the plates like nothing had happened. But when he passed behind me, his fingers brushed the back of my neck, just a touch feather-light. Enough to make me shiver. I'm not trying to push you into anything, he said quietly. If you ever want to leave, you can. But if you want to stay, really stay, I'll make sure you never regret it. I didn't leave. That day blurred into evening. I washed dishes slowly, trying to make sense of my feelings. But nothing felt wrong. Felt like discovery, like waking up from a very long sleep. I sat on the couch, arms wrapped around a blanket. Alan moved through the apartment with quiet energy, setting something up in the bathroom. When I asked what he was doing, he grinned. You'll see, he said. I raised an eyebrow. You're being suspicious. He only winked. You have no idea what awaits you tonight. The bathroom was glowing when I stepped inside. Candles, real ones, not the battery-powered fakes, flickered along the edge of the bathtub. The water was a soft sea of bubbles, steam rising gently into the air, scented with lavender and something sweet beneath it. Maybe orange blossom. Or was it strawberry? Turned startled. Alan stood in the doorway with a folded towel in his hands, eyes warm, expression calm. I thought you deserved to relax. I'm not royalty, I said, my voice small. He smiled faintly. You're wrong. You've just forgotten how it feels to be treated like someone precious. I couldn't speak. He left me alone to soak. I slipped into the water slowly, the warmth wrapping around me like a memory. Closed my eyes. I didn't think about where I was, or who had drawn this bath, or what it meant. I just let myself feel. When the water cooled and I stepped out, he was waiting in the hallway, a soft instrumental playing in the background. Jazz again. Familiar, almost protective. You okay? He asked, handing me the towel. He nodded. That was only the beginning, he murmured. The next words came softly. Lie down. On the bed. Just trust me. My heart did a strange thing in my chest. But I didn't argue. I lay down on the comforter, wrapped in the towel, damp hair clinging to my shoulders. He opened a small bottle, and the air filled with the scent of strawberries. His hands were gentle, firm. He started at my feet, slow, circular motions with his thumbs pressing into the arches, as if he were trying to press out a lifetime of fatigue. I let out a soft sigh I hadn't meant to. You're tense, he said. You have no idea. His hands moved upward to my calves, my thighs. His fingers strong, precise. When he lifted the towel just a little higher, his knuckles brushed the inside of my leg. A soft sound escaped me before I could stop it. He paused. I looked over my shoulder, flushed. Sorry, I whispered. Don't apologize, he said, his voice deeper now. I want you to feel good. You deserve to feel good. He didn't cross the line. He didn't have to. He kept massaging for nearly an hour, the scent of strawberries sinking into my skin. I was half asleep when he finally spoke again. You don't have to get up, he said gently. Hey, just sleep here. I opened my eyes. In your bed. He nodded. Yes. I didn't argue. Couldn't. I woke to the sound of something clinking in the kitchen. The light streaming through the curtains was soft, and for a moment I forgot where I was. Then I saw the chair in the corner, the hoodie draped over it. Lan's hoodie. I sat up slowly, the scent of strawberry oil still faint on my skin. When I padded out into the kitchen, he was standing at the stove, flipping pancakes, shirtless. His dark hair tousled, his arms flexing as he turned the batter. Good morning, he said without looking back. I smiled despite myself. You're making pancakes. He turned, holding up a spoon. With jam. And chocolate. And coffee with ice cream. My heart did something foolish. You remembered. Of course I did, he said simply. He plated everything with care, placing a single slice of orange beside my cup like it was a flourish in a restaurant. As I took my first bite, he sat across from me, elbows on the table, gaze steady. I want you to stay, he said. And blinked. What? Stay here. With me. As long as you want. Forever if you want. I swallowed, suddenly uncertain. Alan, this is different. But it doesn't feel wrong, does it? No, I whispered. It doesn't. He leaned forward, more serious now. If one day you wake up and decide this isn't what you want, you can leave. I won't stop you. But if you do want this. I don't want to leave, I said before I could talk myself out of it. Good, he said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. Because I haven't felt this alive in years. Neither had I.